Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with Cathy Schmidt. It's just great to be with a friend and talking about some pretty interesting stuff. Now, you are CEO and president of Stahl Construction Company, right?
That is correct.
And am I correct in saying that you might have been there before, even though that this is a new position for you?
Yes, I have been back for about 4 months, but I was with Stahl for 15 years. Earlier in my career, I left there in 2010 and just came back about 4 months ago, and so been gone for 12. So things are a little different. Some things are the same, but things are a lot different 12 years later.
Well, and the fact that you did 15 years at Stahl, not that that was like a sentence or anything, because you obviously like it and came back.
Right.
But and then did 12 years after that. Like, you must have started when you were 12 years old.
Yeah, right. Nope. I started actually at Stahl shortly after I started working, but I had kind of fallen into construction a little bit by accident. My undergrad degree is business marketing.
From Iowa, right?
From Iowa State.
Okay. Oh,
Gotta
sorry.
make sure you say Iowa State. You know, we don't like the other
Stand
people in the
corrected.
state. But yeah, so I got that business marketing degree, and the recruiters at the time on campus were mostly recruiting for sales jobs. And I thought, well, I have a marketing degree. Why am I not getting a marketing job? But that's not what the recruiters were recruiting for. So the company that I ended up getting a job with was the CEO of the company was an Iowa State grad. So he would always send recruiters to campus. And it was for Armstrong World Industries, which is a big manufacturer of building products.
Cool.
Most people would know them for flooring.
Okay, yeah.
Right? You've
Yep.
heard the name Armstrong.
Right.
I actually was a commercial ceiling salesperson. So, if you would have asked me before the job got offered to me that there was somebody making a living selling acoustical ceilings, it would not, I would not have.
There's a lot of different acoustical ceilings. Like, super
you would
interesting.
Not know, right? You would not even know, right? So they're headquartered in Pennsylvania, and so part of the gig is you go out there for 3 months during the summer to get trained, not only on their product line, but also on how to sell. Because surprisingly, with a marketing degree, I had not one sales class in my undergraduate.
Interesting.
Education. So they teach you everything about how to sell. And then you get any territory that they assign you to. So I ended up getting Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Interesting.
And so I covered all of Western Michigan. And because I learned about their product and how construction worked, I really started to become embedded in the industry and started to know enough about how buildings were designed, how buildings were specified, how they were built, that it really just made it hard for me to not just stay in the industry and keep growing. So I was in Michigan for a few years, and then I moved back to Minnesota. I'm from St. Paul originally, Shoreview. And so I wanted to come back, and came back and worked for them for a little while here.
Oh.
So shortly thereafter, I went to work at Stahl. So
How did you hear about that position?
Well, this is going to date me.
Okay.
I was on maternity leave with my daughter, my first child, and I looked in the newspaper
Oh,
for
yes,
an ad.
of course. Yeah.
And
the
it was
classifieds.
actually a blind ad, didn't have a company name.
Oh.
But it was a combination position that really appealed to me. It was both business development and marketing. It had a little bit of both. And so I applied, and through a series of interviews, I ended up getting the job. Funny story about that, which a lot of women can relate to. When I was on probably my second or third interview, they wanted me to come in one afternoon, and my parents were both working. My husband was traveling, which is a theme throughout our life. He traveled a lot, always has. And I'm like, I don't have anybody to watch her. Now, mind you, I'm like 3 months into being a mom. I'm clueless. And they're like, well, you can just bring her with you. And I'm,
Wow.
okay. So I picked a time in the afternoon that I thought she might be sleeping. And she came to my interview, and she sat in her car seat in the conference room behind me, slept the whole time, thankfully. And I thought, walking out of there, any company that would let me bring my child
That's
to the
amazing.
interview has got to be pretty cool.
That is
because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, she could start crying. Who knows? But
did she always cooperate like that ever since
no.
then? Okay.
But I mean, that moment in time, she did.
Yeah,
so she always kind of credits herself that she was a part of me getting that original job.
She probably was. She was so cute. They just did to see more of you and her. So.
Exactly.
Well, that is amazing. What a great story. Because that would seem not maybe even that crazy today, although, but back in those days, I mean, kind of unheard of.
Yeah. Well, and I think the next thing that happened that continued to show me how committed they were to their employees and to families is my son is only 16 months younger than my daughter. So pretty shortly after I started the job, I got pregnant. So I was kind of telling the owner founder at the time, before I left on maternity leave, I don't know how I'm going to manage this. They're both really going to be young. My husband's still traveling a lot. I don't know. And he kind of went, well, we'll figure it out, right? So I'm on maternity leave with my son, and it's like maybe, I don't know, halfway through my maternity leave, and I get a call from Wayne one day, and he says to me, I just wanted you to know that whatever you need when you get back is fine. We'll figure it out. And I'm like, great. Well, like what made you, give me a call and tell me this? He said, well, last weekend I had to watch Mike all weekend. My wife was gone, and I just kind of now understand what you're talking about.
Wow.
And I think Mike was probably like 10 years old at the time. So it wasn't like a baby,
right.
But I'm like, hey, whatever works. If that really made you realize it's hard to juggle it all. So I actually, for about a year, I was 3 days a week. That was our agreement. And so I had 2 days at home where I could kind of do a lot of the, errands and all that kind of stuff you normally do on the weekend.
Yeah.
And then for a long time before I became president there, I was 4 days a week. So I always had kind of a flexible schedule before there was such a thing.
Yeah.
So it really made it possible for me during that time in my life when my kids were young to make it all work.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned Wayne Stahl.
Yes.
Wayne started Stahl Construction, right? And he's been really great. You've had a great relationship. But talk to me about how he started the company and a little bit more about him, because he seems like he's I know him a little bit, but he's really been open to different kinds of things and being really supportive of you and all the decisions you've made over the years.
Yeah, no, he's just a terrific guy, and we've really had a great working relationship over the years, even though I did leave for a little while. He started the company in 1981 here in Minneapolis, and he actually started with one client, and that was Trammell Crow.
Oh, really?
So if you remember back in the day, Trammell was the big developer in town, building all the Class A office space, really high-end, high-quality work.
Right.
And so what Stahl was to Trammell Crow was not the builder of the exterior of towers. They would hire a larger contractor to do that, and then they were the TI contractor.
Wow.
So they would, start a project like Colonnade, and Stahl would set up shop in the building, and just as they signed tenants, they would just go up and down the building and complete the work until the building was built out. So it was a pretty nice gig. I mean, you definitely had to perform.
Right.
They had high expectations, and all of the tenants were typically, high-end tenants.
Yeah, right.
So definitely high expectations, but just really built a solid team of people that could cater to those client needs and really do a great job. So really built his business on that Trammell Crow relationship.
Wow. Yeah. What a great.
For probably about 10 years.
What a great way to start.
Right. No, really great way. And the nice part about that is I think towards the end of the first 10 years, he was realizing, hey, probably isn't a good idea to only have one client. As good as they are.
Absolutely.
You just never know, right? And sure enough, they ended up struggling at the end of, when the kind of crash happened.
Absolutely.
And so before that time, he had started really looking at different kinds of work, municipal work, school work, was bidding work. And really, because of all that work he'd done with Trammell, had built up such a base that he could get bonded. He could do some of those things that maybe other smaller generals couldn't do. So by the time I arrived in 1995, they already had diversified quite a bit, and we just kept building on that as I started.
Yeah, and you started in marketing, and then you ended up in the C-suite, right?
Correct.
So how did that all come to be?
We really, I was in that marketing business development role for the first about 8 years, about half my time there. and really just, got to know the team really well, got beyond kind of, just doing the marketing and business development. And I think Wayne always knew that I wanted something more. I did get my MBA right before I started there. And so I think he realized that I was always, kind of wanting more general business involvement, leadership involvement beyond just the marketing and business development. So I kind of worked towards that. I became a vice president before I became president, but then we had a change in our leadership team, and Wayne came to me and asked me if I wanted to, really work with him side by side. He was never really wanting to do the day-to-day operations of the business and really wanted to focus more on the conceptual estimating side, the pre-construction side. He's a civil engineer and just a real numbers guy, and that's really where he enjoys it the most and where he feels like he adds the most value. So we made a really great team. Before I took the job, he asked me right before I was going on vacation for a week, and I actually asked him to go back to some of our key, especially field people. Our field superintendents are so important to the success of our projects. And, I just wanted to make sure they were supportive of it, because I would have been the first woman in that position. And they're pretty, the industry's pretty used to having guys be, in those leadership positions. And
absolutely.
After a week, I came back from vacation. He said, I talked to, our top 3-4 folks. And because I'd built such a great relationship with them over the prior 7-8 years, they really, believed in me and trusted that that was a good decision, and they were all for it. So then I felt really good about, taking it on and knowing that I had a lot of support throughout the company.
Yeah, I mean, there's so few women in the C-suite, and it's actually like less than 25% of all C-suite positions in the country, and even less, like 13% today that are in construction in a leadership role. I mean, I can't even imagine what the numbers were back then. I mean, did you go to meetings with other women, and how did you know that you were cut out to be a president?
Right. Not a lot of women at most meetings. I mean, it's really mostly men, but I think because I started out in the industry as my first job, it was just normal. Like, I didn't really think about it. It wasn't like I went to a meeting and went, took a tally and, I'm the only woman here. It's just what I was used to.
Right.
So I can't say I ever really thought a lot about it. I think what I really have always tried to do is just do my job to the best of my ability, show how I'm adding value, and hope that people see that. And then just it eventually elevates you to different things. I think the times where I've tried to push it, and try to push myself into a place where maybe I haven't built that, credibility yet, it doesn't always go the way I think it's going to go. So I just try to build the credibility and see where it takes me. And it just has always kind of worked out for me that I've been recognized for those sorts of efforts and then asked to do more.
Well, and it's taken you to a lot of places. You've been able to fulfill that president seat at a few different construction-related companies.
Yeah.
So what was the impetus for you leaving Stahl, and what was your experiences like in between Stahl Part 1 and Part 2?
Part 2, right? Yeah. So my primary impetus for leaving is probably twofold. One is we were just starting to hit the recession at that point in 2010 when I left. And
like,
so
that recession and this recession.
Yeah, right, exactly, right.
We lived through a few of them.
Totally, yeah. So I was starting to look forward and see that, it's going to be slow for a while. I just felt like, it didn't make a lot of sense to have both Wayne and I there when I knew it was going to be slow. And then the other big piece of it is I just, because I fell into construction, I guess I always had this little question in the back of my mind. Am I really supposed to be in some other industry? Is there something else out there that I could contribute to that I would enjoy? And so I guess it was probably just being a little bit unsettled about that I thought,
curious
curious what, let's see what else is out there.
Yeah.
Now, really terrible timing on my part because, it was not a great time to look for a job in 2010. So it took me a long time. The side benefit of that I didn't anticipate when I decided to do it is my kids were early in high school right then. And so I ended up getting some really great moments with them.
Yeah.
Right after school, I wasn't home all the time, but when I was, I would get a whole different conversation than I would get at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock at night when I would normally be coming home from work.
Right.
And so I just am grateful that I had those sorts of experiences that I wasn't anticipating.
Right.
That really were kind of neat, that I got a chance to be with my kids a little bit when they were a little bit older, like I was when they were younger. So that was great. The few different things I did, I started out being president of the CEO Roundtable Group, which was a peer sharing organization that I was part of when I was at Stahl.
Okay.
And they needed a leader for a period of time. And so I did that for about a year.
Interesting.
It wasn't really something that I wanted to do long term, but it was a good experience. And I really appreciated them giving me an opportunity to do something different.
Yeah.
One of my friends that I met through CEO Roundtable had purchased a company that was I would call it kind of a startup, because the original founder had just never really been able to make it anything bigger than just a few people. He had purchased that company, and so about a year into my role at CEO Roundtable, asked me if I wanted to come and help him try to build it and scale it to a national business. And so that company name is Surface Quest.
Yep.
And so I did that for 6 years, and was really a great experience. It was construction related, but it wasn't general contracting. So
Sure.
It was a material supplier and installer of a kind of a new product to the North American market called architectural film.
Which I think is so interesting, because you had the job of not only selling a product, but you had to sell the concept too.
Yes.
Like, it's super easy to sell something that's tried and true, right? Even though you
Right.
can put a different spin on it, but trying to convince people to do something totally different. I mean, I've tried to do that over the years and do things really different in the commercial real estate brokerage industry. And boy, it's really, really challenging to get people to understand kind of a new concept.
It's a massive paradigm shift. And in the case of Surface Quest, the paradigm shift was, in the US especially, when we want something to look different, we tear it out and start over. That's what we do. We don't try to preserve it. We don't try to work with what's there. We just say, that's not what I want. I'm just going to start over.
Yeah.
And this product is really allowing you to reuse existing fixtures, existing things in your space, and make them look different.
Right.
And that is a huge paradigm shift. So, I think I understand better after 6 years what the original founder struggled with, which
Yeah.
is, you can grow it in small increments, but growing it to scale is really hard.
Yeah.
And the other half of it that made it hard there is that not anybody could install the material. You had to have trained installers. And
So
not
did you
only
have those on staff then? Or?
yes,
Okay.
but we didn't have very many, and we were
Okay.
trying to sell across the U.S.
Got it.
And so the training is also interesting because it doesn't install like wallpaper, but a lot of wallpaper installers would be our first go-tos to try to basically have them unlearn what they knew how to do and relearn a new way. And you'd learn it, but really the way you'd get good at it is doing it a lot.
Yeah.
And that just takes time.
Yeah.
And these days it's really hard for people to make the commitment for the amount of time it's going to take to get really good. And so we'd have a lot of people we would train, and then a month into it, they go, yeah, that's kind of hard. So I think I'm going to go do something else. And so it was really challenging.
It was even easier to find people then. I mean,
now I don't know. So
Right.
so
next-
after 6 years,
Yep.
I just was still wearing a lot of hats. We were still relatively small. I was just feeling kind of burned out on the small company, really intense.
But what a great experience.
But great experience.
Yeah.
And Greg and I, the investor,
friend,
the
the
owner,
owner. Yep.
just it was really fun working with him too. So
Yep.
we had a great time. So I left there and really wanted to try to find something that would be a little bit more established business, but probably still in that same role.
Okay.
President, sort of, leader, overall general manager, or really trying to get back into business development and just doing that, and
Okay.
kind of taking a break from the bigger
The leadership
leadership role.
Yeah.
And so my first gig after that was a business development only position at a large general contractor. So I did that for a year, and then the year after that, I did a more back to the president role for another family-owned business.
Yeah.
And so just coincidentally, last fall, Wayne was making some changes, and we got to talking, and just one thing led to another, and it made sense for me to come back. So,
Well, and I think you've told me that you've stayed in touch with him over the years.
I
And
have.
You guys regularly
Yes.
have kind of continued your relationship. And I mean, that's really
Always.
important, right?
Yes.
Like, I think, we can all leave places, but staying in touch with the people and leaving on good terms. But he's always been a really important kind of mentor.
Absolutely.
In your life,
Yeah. No,
right?
and I think, he is a great example of a business owner that really has been an advocate for women in leadership positions. And,
What a
making
gift.
me president, the person that took over after I left was also a woman.
Wow.
And I think he just really believes in, being committed to that. And that has always been a great benefit to me.
So there is research that shows that women, when women are in a majority of the C-suite positions in a company, they have a more diverse company. They're more profitable. I mean, there's a lot of positives to bringing that influence into the leadership roles in a company. So he's generous in being willing to be open-minded, but he's also smart, right?
Exactly, right, for sure. Yeah, and I do think that he's always thought that my company can be more successful if I have more voices at the table.
Yeah.
And I just from other experiences I've had, I think it does take men like him opening that door. Women can push and push and push
Yeah.
and try to get there, but you need men to open up the door and say, I want you at the table, and you need to bring more with you.
Right.
Because I see value in bringing that diverse, perspective to the table. But you've got to actually open the door and invite people in.
It's interesting because being a woman business owner for 21 years, it's changed so
Yes.
much. So there weren't that many men opening those doors
right.
Originally. And now it's sort of like I'm getting invited to seats at the table because there's so much pressure on men to
Yes.
have women at the table. I've never heard that before, ever. I mean,
Right.
it's crazy. I mean, I've been in meetings where they said a woman will never be successful in this. And now they're saying, hey, we are being judged because we don't have enough women here. I mean, it's a totally different.
Yes.
So I don't know that they're, that men have totally changed their attitude. I just think they're just saying, like, we're kind of being forced at this point to kind of open those doors.
Well, and I think that is a little bit, I think our industry is a little behind on that.
Well, of course.
Because I do think in other places, like my husband's in the agriculture industry, which is also pretty male dominated, but in leadership positions, they have more and more women that are really adding so much to what their whole business can do, and the men are recognizing it, and they're now just doing it. Like they're seeing the value, and I do think we are a little behind there, where it's still a little bit of a force.
Yeah.
But once they start to see it, hopefully, it progresses beyond that, and it becomes something that they want to.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We just need all the voices at the table, right?
do.
It's just you just really want smart people,
Exactly.
with a little bit different, view of how things could be done, and boy, that adds up to something that's greater than any one of us individually.
And the biggest thing to that, I think, is instead of feeling like if you're inviting someone in that you have to give up your seat, make the table bigger, add more seats.
I love that.
You don't have to give up your seat. We want you there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But bring more people around the table, and you will all benefit from it. It can be good for everybody.
Wow, what a great point. So you're back at Stahl.
Yes.
The world has changed. The industry's changed. Construction's really different right now. Talk to me about the differences with the company, and then also talk to me about just the industry of construction. I mean, it's a challenge.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I think, there are a few people that are still there that were there when I was there before, which has been great being back with them. That's been terrific. But a lot of new faces too. I would say, the biggest overall change in the industry, I think, is relationships were such a huge part of how we got things done when I was there before.
Okay.
When I say relationships, I mean client relationships, I mean sub relationships, vendor relationships. And, a lot of the people that worked there had worked there their whole career. And so they had relationships with others for that whole time. And so when things got tough on a job, or when you had to have the hard conversation, you were having it with people that you had a relationship with. And they wanted to go back and figure out a way to make it work because they valued that relationship. And I think now a lot of those people have retired and they're not coming back. They're retired.
Yeah.
They didn't just leave. Like, it's not just churn, like I didn't want to work there anymore. It's like, I'm done. And so those same relationships haven't been repopulated. And because there's been a lot of just moving around. I mean, some roles, it's really easy to, get calls on a daily basis from recruiters trying to take you away with a seemingly better offer at a different company. And that churn is really hard on the business.
Yeah, interesting.
It's hard on those relationships. Yeah. And it's hard then to extract the same kind of desire to get something to work that has challenges. Because there are more challenges probably than ever on every job.
Right.
And so if you don't have the relationship, then it's really just a conversation that's contractually driven.
Yeah.
You sign this contract, this is what you agreed to, this is what we agreed to, so now we're going to hold you accountable. And that's just not as much fun, frankly.
Right.
I mean, having to go through those hard conversations all the time with people you don't have a relationship with is really hard.
Interesting.
And so I think it's me thinking through, and our whole team thinking through, not kind of pining for the old days and expecting that we're going to get back to that.
Right.
But how do we maximize the current environment and make it the best it can be for our clients and our subs, knowing that we're probably going to have to go back to that contract more often than we'd like to.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's business, and everyone signed the contract knowing this is what they were agreeing to do.
Right. So I've heard that, it used to be that the subcontractor was, doing whatever they can to get business from the general contractor, right? Mm-hmm. And now I'm hearing in some cases like the role is reversed, where you're at the mercy of the subcontractors and their schedules, and they're kind of calling the shots a little bit more than the general contractor is because there's so few subs.
We just had this conversation yesterday
really?
On one particular project where I compared it to, employees are in the driver's seat right now too.
Right.
It's a very similar situation where they can kind of ask for what they want. And, you as the employer have to try to, balance what you've given to other employees, what their experience level is, how much you're willing to kind of compromise on all of that, and what your expectations are for that person now. It's the same with subs. They are in the driver's seat. They can probably, especially certain sub scopes of work, they can, if they don't get the job from you, they can get it from another general, or they can go down the street and there's tons of demand for what they do. And so, they're facing a lot of the same challenges, trying to keep their labor force happy, trying to recruit new, younger people into it.
Right.
While they have a lot of people retire, it is very challenging all the way around on the labor front.
So labor is one thing, but also costs and supply chain, both from a timing standpoint and availability standpoint. How are you managing these projects? I mean, we are looking at pricing out a property for a retailer, and the windows and doors and HVAC are 6 to 8 to 12 months out. Steel can be, the small batch steel, they're able to find little pieces of it here and there, but getting a big order for a big project, you're doing big projects, schools and that kind of thing, the lead times on some of those materials. And so you're able, these projects are being priced out on this day, and then months later it actually gets built. How do you manage all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really challenging, and I don't know that we have necessarily the complete magic bullet to solve it all. I think probably the biggest thing we're trying to do internally is to really just be very proactive on every project, and not only with owners and letting them know about the long lead items and the price increases, and you've got to make decisions in a timely way so that we can sign up the subs so that they can get pre-orders in, and we're keeping it on schedule. Just really having a lot of communication on the front end so everyone knows what some of the risks and the challenges are. And then on the back end, we have to do our job and really make sure that we're honoring what the subs are saying on the front end when they're bidding it, and trying to turn it around as fast as we can. Because it used to be, 30, 60, 90 days their bids would hold, and it's 10 days now. And,
Wow.
There's no way we're going to have all of our ducks in a row on a big project in 10 days.
Right.
So we really just have to be super diligent with them, be in conversation, make sure that they understand our timeline. And what that requires on our end is we have to have really, really good staff that are staying on top of it.
Yeah.
And that is, you're right back to that same labor challenge. Having churn and having people leave is really hard. Because, you're starting over with new people and getting them ingrained in what the process is. And the process is changing. It just has to be a lot faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the process is changing, the business is changing, and you're in that leadership role to figure out what that all looks like going forward. You had mentioned that Stahl is a traction company, follows that traction model of how to just make decisions about the business. But you're new, you get to kind of have a fresh perspective, even though you have some history. The industry's changing. We're doing a whole marketing branding session in July for our company, and the gal that I've hired to do that is saying that every one of her companies have rebranded in the last 2 years because the whole world has changed so much in the last couple of years. So tell me about how you see your role in taking this company kind of to the next level, or even just to kind of catch up with what's happened.
Exactly. Yeah. So the company had become a traction company about 2 years ago. So prior to me being there. And so when I started in February, we had actually an annual traction session scheduled in, I believe, April, because our fiscal year ends at the end of February. So we're a little off of the calendar year when we're doing our planning. And I just said, I'm not ready to kind of think about 1 year, 3 year, 10-year goals. I've only been here a couple months. I just need to understand our team, our projects, our clients, and really feel grounded in that before we can kind of plan for the future. So we did a quarterly kind of rock update so that we could focus on some short-term items. And that I think has been really effective, especially in our L10s. Being able to, go through all of those quarterly rocks that we all agreed to. So
and rocks are
their goals
in this
essentially
traction
for
terminology.
Goals for the quarter.
Yeah.
And then you have annual rocks. So it just and there's a ownership assigned to each one of those goals.
Okay.
So one person is responsible for moving it forward. They may involve other people, but they're owning it. So that's I think a really key part of traction is having ownership on things, so that you can have a goal, but if nobody owns it, it's like, when does it? No one's ever going to spend time on it. So having the ownership is huge. So we are planning on doing an annual session at the end of July, and I'm hoping at that point to have a little bit more of a 1 year, 3 year, 10-year outlook. The company is 41 years old this year.
So impressive.
So I think, we are going to need to kind of think about what does that 1 and 3 year time frame look like. I'm probably a little fuzzier right now on 10. And part of that is understanding, Wayne's long-term goals too.
Sure.
So that's going to be part of the conversation for the 10 year. But the 1 and 3 year, I think one of the nice parts about being at Stahl is that and I've heard this from some of the superintendents that I've met with since I started that are newer to the company.
Okay.
We have a number of them that came from very large contractors, and they intentionally came to Stahl because they wanted to be on a team that they could have a voice. They weren't just a number. They were part of what the future looks like, and felt like they were part of it, and that they were being heard and listened to.
Yeah.
And so I really believe that's one of our differentiators, is what we can offer in terms of team members. We're not trying to be, Mortenson. We're not trying to be the big company.
Right.
We really do a pretty serious go, no-go sort of conversation on every project we go after to make sure that it's the kind of client that fits our core values, fits where we can add value, where we think we've got experience and we have knowledge that can help them. Those are the kind of projects that we want to go after, and we're not trying to, get 100 projects a year. We're probably
So what are you building?
Probably 8 to 10 projects a year. Okay. So our 4 biggest segments. We've always been very big in the education market.
Okay.
So we do a lot of K-12 schools, a little bit of higher ed, but mostly K-12.
Okay.
Private, public, charter, all of those have been schools we've done.
Great.
We've done historically a lot of hospitality, so hotels are a big part of our backlog and part of our pipeline.
I've got a project we should chat about offline.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yep. So hospitality is a big one. Municipal projects, so city type projects, city, little bit of county, but mostly city. So fire stations, police stations, community centers, public works buildings. Those are all the types of projects that we like in that sector. And then we have over time done office, done retail, really done everything, multifamily. That's really more dependent on what's busy at the time. So, I think office is not super busy. We're not really doing a lot of TI type work. So I would say multifamily is the other one that we would probably focus on in the next year. But that's part of our planning too, is looking at that. And then the other big thing that's changed since I left is we established an office in Iowa. So we have an office in a suburb of Des Moines, Grimes. Okay. And over the last 12 years, we've built a number of buildings in the Des Moines area. When I was just leaving in 2010, we were just finishing a project at Iowa State, biorenewables building.
How did that come to be?
I went to school there, but that wasn't really why. We just bid it. We're low general contractor. Really, it was so fun to have a project on campus, though. It was just awesome.
What a neat experience.
And they just kept building the resume down there to a point where it needed kind of a permanent team. And I'm really excited about doing more down in the Des Moines area, too. So that's another growth market for us.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I so appreciate you taking this time. I learned something, and I'm just totally engaged. I can't wait to see what you do with this Stahl in your second chapter there. And really, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and it was just great to talk to you.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to talking to you again soon. But
all right. Sounds good.
Super happy with what you were able to share with everybody today. It's really amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.